Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of She Plays Games. I hope all of you are holding up okay with the lockdown. I personally have just been trying to keep motivated during this time while also looking after my children who are very young and are actually very keen to start playing video games. My eldest is playing games at the moment, but my youngest keeps trying to steal the PlayStation 4 controller and hiding it in certain places. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. But anyway, I'm really excited for today's episode. I have Keza MacDonald, who's currently the video games editor at The Guardian, but this is only one of the many publications that Keza has been a part of. Keza started writing for magazine publications like GamesTM and has since moved from strength to strength with working at websites like Eurogamer, IGN, and Kotaku, just to name a few. Keza also helped write the Dark Souls companion book You Died, and even hosts the podcast Spawn Point, which is dedicated to video game fans in and out of the industry who are parents. I really hope you enjoy Keza's story, and if you like what I do, please be sure to subscribe to my podcast on your chosen platform. This is episode 18 of She Plays Games. Hey Keza, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, how you doing?
Not too bad, hanging in there.
How are you? Life.
Oh my goodness. I think I've consumed more coffee than I've ever consumed in my entire life.
It's chocolate for me. It's my vice, my quarantine vice. Also, I can share that with my largest child.
Yes.
So I don't feel too selfish for just buying enormous bars of chocolate every day. It's fine.
I have an excuse. I have a child. Look at me. Oh, but yeah, how are you holding up?
Okay, it's hard, isn't it, in quarantine with small children?
Yeah.
I'm on maternity leave at the moment with my youngest, who's 7 months old. So I've been having quite an intense few months anyway, as it was. So actually, I mean, life hasn't changed all that much, really, from how it was about 4 months ago when he was a newborn and we were stuck inside for that reason. So yeah, it's, it is what it is. We'll all get through it eventually. Thank God for video games in the meantime.
Yeah, to just like give you that little bit of rest, or just like, I don't have to focus, I can just play.
Yeah, just Animal Crossing has been an absolute lifeline for me for the last month. It really
has. Came out at the perfect time.
Didn't it? Yeah. Although it's become a cliche to even say that now.
I know.
Right now, but it's true. It did come out at the perfect time.
It was perfect. But before we begin, I just want to say how honored I am to have you on the show, as you're such an inspirational figure within the games industry, within the world of journalism and editorial. Like, you are just a shining star that we all look up to.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. I
still remember, I think I was at a couple of the shows where you had won awards, and I was just like, oh, Keza, like I just kept seeing your name everywhere. It was great.
I feel like it's been a long time since those days. It was a good 6 or 7 years ago, I think, was the last time they had, because they used to have these video games media awards every year, and they were great. They were really fun time.
Yeah,
and,
they were.
I won a few of them, which was great, and then they kind of evaporated about 4 years ago.
Well, I think what's it called? The last one I went to was that game shop company. Oh, what were they called?
Green Man Gaming?
Was that
Was it them? Were they
I don't remember.
I seem to remember.
It was the one. It was the one where they just all got really drunk.
Oh, no. That was the Granger Games one.
Yeah.
That was legendary. Absolutely
yes.
legendary. The sponsor for these award show, they hired huge orange Hummers and like very bored models.
Yep.
And some dwarves.
Yeah.
To like just, and it was really awkward. It was the most awkward thing ever.
It was so strange. They kept getting on stage as well. Like
they kept heckling everybody who was like on stage for any reason. It was the weirdest thing. It was a bit of a scandal at the time, I seem to remember.
Yeah, yeah. And it was my first ever Games Media Awards that I went to as well. So we were just kind of like, is this what it's normally like?
It was so weird and awful. That was, and also because it became such a scandal, and the Granger Games people allegedly were doing drugs in the toilets and squaring up to people and stuff. It just became like a complete outrage of an event.
Oh my God, it was. It was.
And because of that, the photos were never released. Like, they took a bunch of photos of the night, but because it was such an absolute shit show.
Oh my God, I never realized that.
They never released them. So that was actually the first time I ever won an award ever for anything.
Oh, and they didn't even give you your picture.
No photos, no nothing, just me feeling very awkward standing on the stage going,
yeah.
Not the greatest night.
No, but I will say it was the night that I met Greg Davies, and he he did make the night a lot better.
So tall.
Yeah. He's a giant. He is absolutely ginormous. But anyways, so with all that in mind, you've been writing for video games publications since you were 16 years old.
I have, yes. Just quite a long time ago now.
Yeah. And starting with like magazines like GamesTM, rest in peace. What got you interested into writing in the first place?
So when I was a kid, I was one of those very weird children that read all the time. And I lived largely in my own imagination, to the extent that I was once sent to see the school psychologist because I didn't have any mates.
Oh no, you were Rory Gilmore.
Yeah, I was one of those kids. And when I was about 6, I got sent to see the school psychologist, and it was just because I read all the time.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there isn't. But there you go. Everything has to be diagnosable now.
I know.
But I really loved stories at that age, and so I wanted to write books. That was what I wanted to do in my life. So I wrote little stories from when I was really tiny. I've been writing tiny stories. And then I started getting very interested in video games when I was about 8 or 9. And they just really captured my imagination. Like, I'd played games before. I played games like Mario Kart and Mario on the SNES with my brother. And I was super into it. But the first game that really caught me was Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. And that really, like, I was drawing pictures of everything I saw in it, and I was kind of mapping it out, and I had notebooks full of, I made up stories about it. I was about 7, I think, 7 or 8. And that was the first game that properly captured my imagination. And so I always wrote and loved to write. And throughout my teens, I wrote all sorts of stuff, short stories, novels, terrible novels, I should point out. It would be so embarrassing if they ever came to light. I think they died along with my old laptop many years ago, thankfully.
Thank God the times before like fanfiction.net existed and everything was still on there.
Literally a few years before we got internet in my house. But yeah, and then I started writing about games because I was interested in them, and I wrote about everything. Then when the internet happened, remember we got broadband in my house when I was 13, and at that point, I started doing the usual thing, posting on message boards. And, I managed to get in contact with this guy called Martin, who worked at one of my favorite magazines that I liked at the time. And I just randomly emailed him out of nowhere with this probably long rambling thing about games. And he said, you should try writing reviews and stuff. Like, you can write, Didn't know I was 13.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I started writing, reviews and opinion pieces and stuff, and I just kept going until I wasn't dreadful anymore. So because I got such an early start, and I was writing on various kind of fan websites, like I had this website called Mad Gamers, which I remember very fondly, and there was like me and a couple of other people who sort of wrote reviews and, playing at being games journalists, really. And then actually 3 of the 5 people have actually made a career out of it in the end, 3 of the 5 of us.
Oh, that's fantastic.
We weren't totally terrible.
No.
Yeah. So that's what got me into it was basically I was interested in writing. I always have been. I still one day think I'd love to write books. But I've now been a journalist for so long that I've kind of, whenever I write anything, I stop and I look at it and it's like 1,200 words long.
Yeah.
So it makes writing anything novel length quite a challenge.
Yeah, no, I know. But that's amazing that you had somebody actually to sort of say to you, look, you could do this for a living. When I was that age, I wasn't even remotely thinking about that. I was reading games magazines, but I had never sort of even clicked that it was possible to write for games,
Yeah, this is the thing. I think that, I often think I missed a few boats in my career, in that when I was starting out on writing about games, it was right at the time when people just maybe 3 or 4 years older than me were getting given $1 million by random venture capitalists to start websites.
Oh my God.
So I was a bit too young for that particular wave. There was a guy I knew who got a few million. He got invested. He had a fan site of his own. It got picked up by some investor guy, and so he was 16 and had a few million quid in his pocket.
Jeez, that's
and
crazy.
Then the same thing happened to Eurogamer. Although actually I think Eurogamer had a very small investment. They mostly made it a business themselves. But the guy who ran Eurogamer for years, who founded it, Rupert Lohman, he was a 16-year-old. And so he was like going into these meetings with with game publishers and stuff, little teenager.
Yeah.
That was me, but a few years behind. So I missed that particular boat.
But it's okay. I mean, we all have our paths, I always sort of think like we get things when we're ready for them. I mean, granted, it would be great to be a millionaire.
And you know what? I know no one gets into writing of any variety for the money, I think. And especially not games writing. It is an appallingly poorly paid career. I think there's very few people in the UK who make a decent living out of it. But, people do it because they're just passionate about it. And that is one of the reasons, unfortunately, why people tend to stop. Like, I'm unusual in the games media because I've been doing this for 15 years now, nearly. And most people do a few years and then find they need more money, or they need a different. They need to do a career that can support a family or pay for a mortgage or whatever. So I'm very, very fortunate in that I've managed to be in positions where I can still be a games journalist and do what I love. But I can also earn enough to make it realistic to have an adult life and a family, which is not that common.
Yeah, and I mean that's just so amazing. But getting back to your university days, where while studying, you were also contributing to Eurogamer. What was it like to handle both workloads, working on your degree as well as working on Eurogamer?
It was a strange time, because I knew that. So when I was at school, games journalism wasn't a real career, as you mentioned. Like it wasn't a thing that people would have. I remember my careers advisor being like, "That's not a real job." And the only reason
that's such a blow. That's such a blow.
It was infuriating. I mean, the only reason that I pursued it so aggressively was because I had, got in contact with Martin, who'd, basically given me an in and say, do this. And he gave me, in the end, when I was 16, I got work experience on GamesTM. And I stayed in there's a tiny little scrappy publisher above a TK Maxx in Bournemouth. So glamorous. And I went down and I spent 2 weeks there. And at the end of that 2 weeks, they said, "Can you do another 2 weeks?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I did another 2 weeks and then they offered me a job. So instead of doing my last year of school, my parents were so delighted about this. Instead of doing my last year of school, I did some of my exams early. I left and I just went and wrote for this magazine for a year. And the reason I went back to university is because I promised my mum. She was like, "We'll support you, but you have to promise you'll come back and do university." Because obviously they thought this career wouldn't go anywhere. Yeah. So that was the deal. I was kind of supported by my parents to go and take that job. But in return, I had to come back a year later and start my degree. So I did a degree at Edinburgh University, and I did German and Japanese was my degree.
Which is so cool because you actually got to go over as well.
That's exactly why. Yeah, I mean, I love languages. That's my other passion. I love languages. I speak 4 languages, and I think they're so cool. I'd speak more if I had any time, which I don't know.
I know.
And my other choice, apart from being a journalist, would have been to be an academic in languages. So I was going for that as hard as I was going for journalism, because I was smart enough to know that media is very precarious. Not everyone makes it, so on and so on. And I did have this little head start from having worked on that magazine for a year, and that gave me an in as a freelancer at the time, gave me an in to be able to say, look, I'm not just, I'm not a beginner, I can write. And so I was, financing my way through university by writing for Eurogamer, and VG 24/7 started that year. So I was doing stuff for them. And, various magazines that I'd written for in the past, I was sort of still pitching quite aggressively. So the way I worked my way through uni was through being a journalist. And the funny thing was, it was like living a double life, because people who knew me from Games World obviously had no idea about my academic life. And people that I met through uni had no idea that I had this whole secret career as a games writer.
It's so weird, isn't it?
And it is funny because by the time I was finishing university, I'd gotten somewhere with my games writing. I was doing quite well. And I remember friends, usually female friends, would go on dates and mention me for some reason. And people would be like, "Wait, Keza MacDonald who writes for IGN?" And they'd be like, "What?" And they'd find out I had this whole internet life.
You've been revealed.
Yeah, it was completely different from my academic life. So yeah, it was quite a fun time actually. I mean, I loved university. I loved studying. I'm a huge nerd. I loved studying, and to be able to work my way through. I came out of university without debt, which is almost unheard of for a millennial.
Yeah.
Like completely unheard of. So I was really grateful for that. Also, thank you, Scottish education system, because they let you go to university for free, not for however much the English pay now, £9,000 a year. Madness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And America's even worse.
Of course,
it's horrible.
Yeah.
Like yeah. It's really sad. But yeah, I think it is still that way in Scotland, isn't it?
It is, yeah. You pay. I mean, it's not completely free. It's about £1,000 a term, but compared to
that's like pennies.
It's pennies. Yeah. If you are Scottish, you can go to a Scottish university for that money. So, and at the time, Edinburgh University was one of the best in the world. So I was so fortunate to be able to have my academic career there. And then after that, I went and did the first year of a PhD at King's College in London in comparative literature, which is a completely useless subject, but really fun. And after about 6 months into that, I got a job at IGN I got offered a job at IGN as UK games editor, and I just sacked it off. I was like, I'm not sure I can do it. I can do a degree. I can do my PhD anytime. I can still do it when I'm in my 40s or 50s, whenever. So I weighed it up, and I took the gamble and said, all right, I'm going to go for games journalism, not academia. And yeah, that's why I'm still here.
So what was it like when you spent your years in Germany and Japan?
The absolute best. There's absolutely nowhere in the world that is better than Berlin for a 19-year-old queer woman. It was the absolute best time I've ever had in my life. And I deeply, deeply love Berlin and Germany in general. It's a bit of an obsession of mine. I did my degree was German and Japanese, as I mentioned, but I concentrated very much on Germany. And without getting into all the stuff I think is cool about Germany, I love kind of the history and culture of the place. The language is great. So I just found Berlin is this incredibly kind of permissive, exciting place to be. The clubs were amazing. Like I grew up in Edinburgh. Like we don't have clubs. Like we don't have clubs. We have pubs that open late, basically. And we have like horrible, sticky floored dance halls. That's it. And, going from there to Berlin at 19, incredible. I had the time of my life. I've been back to Berlin pretty much every year since. Like I went back with my family a couple of times, and we're planning to move there if we can, because it's
that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I mean we're a bit sick of Britain now.
Yeah,
because given everything that's happened, it doesn't quite align with our with my family's political leanings, and also our sort of our general ambitions. So we're thinking of moving to Germany pretty soon. So I had a great time there, and I basically didn't work when I was in Germany. I did bits and pieces. But then when I moved to Japan, that was obviously amazing for my games work, because my Japanese is not great. It never was. But, even having what I did of Japanese was helping me to get an insight into games that I loved my whole life, especially kind of Nintendo games and PlayStation, and being able to sort of see the language in which these games were conceived made them. It's like when you read a book in its original language. If you read The Stranger, L'étranger, in French, suddenly it makes more sense. Like you can see, you can understand how it was. You feel like you're closer to the author. And so I felt when I was in Japan and learning Japanese and experiencing Japan, I felt closer to the games that I loved my whole life. And it was a really cool experience. I mean, Japan's an amazing place. And at the time I was there in 2008, it was. It would have been very, very futuristic in the 90s, but it was kind of a 90s version of the future. Like all of the underground stations had contactless payment, which had only just come in London about, a few years previously. But it had been,
wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I mean, Japan got there in the 90s, I think, the late 90s.
Wow.
But it hadn't quite updated itself since. So I'd come over just as the iPhone had come out, for instance, in Europe, and everyone in Japan was in these kind of funny flip phones, which even 2 years previously would have seemed impossibly, like they had email on, even 2 years previously they would have seemed impossibly futuristic, but now Western technology had caught up somewhat. But yeah, Japan was a great experience. I really think studying abroad is really important. It gives you an insight into a different culture, and also it was very interesting to be, a minority in Japan. Like as a white middle class person, you're never really going to be a minority anywhere in Europe. So to go and live somewhere where you're not the norm was very, very informative, I think, and a very important experience for me.
What part of Japan did you stay in?
So I stayed in the incredibly unglamorous city of Nagoya, which is it's halfway between Tokyo and Kyoto on the coast. best known for being the home to Toyota's manufacturing plants. But actually it wasn't, I'd rather have been there than in Tokyo. Like, Tokyo is very overwhelming and very expensive.
Yeah.
So I would like head up to Tokyo on the weekends with my friends and see other people that I knew in Tokyo and stay with them, and be sleeping on futons on the floors of these like incredibly tiny student flats, basically like nose to nose with my friend who'd invited me up. And yeah, I also spent quite a lot of time in Kyoto. I had friends all over the country because everyone that I studied Japanese with had got sent to different parts of the country. So yeah, it was. I did a lot of traveling that year. It was great fun. I saw a lot of the country.
That's really cool. I mean, I ask also because I know that the further out you go in Japan is where they get more, I would say, funny with foreigners.
Yeah, I mean, Nagoya is a big city.
Yeah.
It was definitely not Tokyo in terms of how people responded to foreigners. I remember like the second or third week I was there, I was going to register myself at the alien office, which is an actual thing. You get your alien registration card.
You're out of this world. You are alien.
Those are the words printed on the card. Alien registration card. And we used to call it the Gaijin card. And I was going to the town hall, and there's a bunch of school children just kind of running, in their little pairs, and they're holding hands out of the school. And one of them wasn't looking and bumped into my legs and looked up. And I just went, "Konnichiwa." And she just burst into tears and ran off.
Oh my God.
A huge blonde giant going, "Hello." Must have scared her. Yeah, it was funny. There were a few times where like old people would come up and yell at us. If we were just like hanging around on the street, old people would just come and scream at us. And, sometimes we had policemen stop us for no reason and be like, "Can I see your ID?" And I'm like, "What have we done to deserve this?" Which, of course, is something that happens to, non-white people in Europe and America.
Yeah.
So that was, that had never happened to me before, obviously, because I'm, a white person in Britain. So it was quite something to have that experience of like being constantly suspected for being foreign.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many things as well, like culturally, that we kind of are made aware of, but we're also not made aware of in Japan. Like the whole like idea of just like being, you can't eat while like walking.
Oh God, yeah, like all the kind of random cultural norms that are just so different from yours. And things like, not eating in public is very important. Not eating your sandwich on the train. Not speaking on the train. Like don't talk
you can't do anything.
Yeah, like, don't talk to your friend on the train. Like that's not allowed. I remember we used to call them gaijin fails because we do something that turned out to be incredibly rude. And, not realize because no one would say anything. You just get these quietly appalled looks and you'd be like, "What did I do?"
But they're not allowed to tell you.
Yeah, I was living in a dorm with Japanese students. Like it was half Japanese students and half foreign ones. And my Japanese roommate took me aside after a few weeks and said, "Look, it's really important that you say, when you leave the house, you have to say goodbye, I'm coming back. And when you come into the house, you have to say, I'm back. Like, it's just really important. It's just so rude not to." I was like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry. I didn't realize." You have to... As Shaima I think you have to say it's tadaima, when people come back and go in, you have to say like a bunch of little stock phrases when you're leaving.
Yeah. And it's like when you eat as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Like you have to say like, is it ikimashou or something like that?
Itadakimasu, that's it. Things like that. It's really important to do and say those things.
Which you just wouldn't think of.
Exactly, because it's, it is different. One of the coolest things about Japan, especially at that time, is that it's one of the only truly, truly different places in the world now. There are lots of places that are cool to visit. But if you want to go somewhere really, really different, Japan's one of those places, along with the rest of Asia and parts of Africa. It's really, really different. And that was so cool to experience.
So while you were in Japan, you stumbled upon something very special. You stumbled upon the PlayStation 3 exclusive game developed by From Software, Demon's Souls.
Yeah, probably the defining game of my career, I think.
Oh, my God, Demon's Souls.
It was, so the way that game shops are in Japan, or were, I don't know if it's still like this, but 10 years ago, you would walk into your city center. It was called Osu in Nagoya, our city center kind of shopping area, and there'd be all these shops for games, and all the new stuff would be at the front, but then they had all the old stuff as well, like everything right back to the NES. They would have just out there on the shelves. Like you wouldn't have to go to a retro game shop. Like all shops had a wide variety of games from all eras in them. And so they were like treasure houses, these places, for me.
Yeah.
I go in and I spent a stupid amount of money buying Japanese N64 games that I remembered from the magazines when I was a kid. like I'd be flipping through N64 magazine, and like there was this guy who used to review all the Japanese games, and one of them like Osumo 64 and like the Hamtaro game, which would never come out in the UK ever in a million years. And I bought them all.
Oh, there's a Hamtaro game.
There was. I've got it on my shelf now.
Oh.
I just remember looking at screenshots of it in N64 magazine and thinking, oh man, I'm never going to be able to play it. So I bought like 15 of these games that I remembered from back in the day. And sometimes they were like 200 yen, which at the time was like no money at all.
Yeah.
And I bought like a Japanese N64 to play them on. So all these games shops were just amazing. I spent a lot of time in them. And I would just flip through the stuff at the front. And one day I was in one of the shops and I flipped through and saw something, and I saw the From Software logo. And I liked the Kingsfield games, which were very, very weird, spooky adventure games on the PlayStation, incredibly difficult, really obscure. And I'd played them on a friend's kind of modded PS2 when I was a teenager. And I also enjoyed the Armored Core series. I quite like big stompy robots. So I looked, and I saw the developer, and it looked like a kind of dark fantasy game. And I was like, what the hell's this? And I looked, it was Demon Souls written on it in katakana. I was like, it's fascinating. So I bought it just thinking maybe this will be good. And yeah, I got it home that night and discovered this just extraordinary game, like really amazing game that, I mean, it was like nothing I'd ever played before, the way that it unfolded. I mean, anyone who's played a Souls game will know what I'm talking about. It's like the first hour, you're just like, what the hell, have I got the buttons wrong? Like, what's happening here? What am I supposed to do? Like, it's almost fascinating how opaque it is.
Yeah, there's no guidance whatsoever of what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go, or
and also,
secrets.
Bear in mind, this is in Japanese. So
oh my god,
my
as
Japanese
well.
was never good enough to like fluently read. Like I could look it up, and I was sitting there with my little kanji dictionary trying to play this game, like looking up. And of course, looking it up did nothing, because it would be like, it would tell you the name of an item, and it would be like white goopy stuff, and I'm like, what the hell? What is this?
Yeah.
And it became a bit of a curiosity in my dorm, because people would come around to play games with me often, because I had all the consoles because of my work, and so people would stop by my dorm and come play games. So there was which is great. It was
That's
awesome.
like a treasure trove.
It was really cool. So there was like a group of sort of 6 or 7 of us who used to sort of regularly play together. A couple of Japanese kids, and the rest of them were kind of Americans. Anyway, we were all sitting around at 1 a.m. watching me try to figure out what the hell was going on in this game, and we all just became completely obsessed with it. And then I kind of started Googling around, and I did find like a few people who were like From Software nerds had imported it, and there was like a thread on one forum. This is the extent of the presence of this game on the internet. Like,
wow.
At the time, there was a thread on this one forum where people were like, has anyone else playing this? Has anyone else seen this? And because it was a Japan-only game at the time. And it was a huge flop. Like, it sold barely anything. And, I talked to Hidetaka Miyazaki, the director, in subsequent years. I talked to him about it, and, I got the impression that Sony basically just kind of quietly put it out because they had to. And it didn't really get any buzz. I had never heard of it. And and then so basically after we sort of all worked together, me and my friends and this internet thread, we sort of worked together to conquer this game. And once I'd finished it, I thought, I have to tell the world about this. Like, I thought no one was going to care about this Japan only game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no chance anyone's going to care about this. So I pitched it around, and Eurogamer said, yeah, all right, because they were used to my bullshit by then. I was always pitching them esoteric random Japanese stuff I was writing about, Japanese.
It's like, oh, Keza. Okay.
Exactly, yeah. I was always writing about things like bizarre Japanese arcade games, and, stuff I'd find when I was on my adventures, and, rhythm action stuff that no one cared about. So they let me write about Demon Souls. And that was kind of part of a sort of gradual snowball of word of mouth about that game. And that review remains, I think, the most read review on Eurogamer ever, or one of.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because it obviously picked up all this buzz, and as people started like spreading the word, they find that review, because it was the only one. It was the only English language review, I think. There was maybe one other on an RPG website, but it was one of the first. And
I remember it was Daryl who got me Demon Souls originally. I had never heard of it before he got it for me, but he was just like, Lauren, just play this game. It's really, really hard, but just play it. But I wouldn't have gotten into it if it weren't for him just buying it for me, like just outright just saying, here.
That is how Souls works. Like, you get someone comes to you with it and says, you need to play this. And a lot of people bounce right off it, and their friend goes, no, I'm not letting you miss out on this.
No.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it worked with Demons, I think. And a lot of people tell me that review got them to buy that game. And there was a weird quirk of fate in that there was a version of it released in Hong Kong that had English. Not very good English, but it had an English translation. And so that was a kind of way in for people. And eventually it picked up so much buzz that Atlas picked it up for a US release. And then the rest is history, of course. Like it eventually got brought over to the UK, and then Namco Bandai signed it for Dark Souls. And, that whole series, like, and very rarely in this job do you ever get to really influence anything. But I do like to think that review was a tiny part of what made the Souls series happen. And it was very rewarding. Like immensely rewarding. Yeah. I don't think anything will ever happen like that again. It was a unique combination of circumstances. I can't imagine being that, having any real power like that ever again over a game.
Well, it's like things are so saturated now, aren't they? Like, chances are if there's a good game out there, somebody's going to be talking about it now. Like it's so hard, I think, for hidden gems to
It's really different.
Exist.
Because that was my beat. Like when I was in my early career, my beat was hidden gems and weird stuff. Because that was what I was, I liked digging around and finding odd things. When I was, I had my friend had a modded PS2 when we were teenagers, and I spent a lot of time playing very weird things on the PS2, and especially Japan only stuff. And a few things have happened. Firstly, Japan's games industry has moved almost entirely to mobile, which means that there just aren't very many kind of random PS2 style, Japanese games out there. They just aren't out there, or if they are, they're on phones and you can't get at them. And then the other thing that happened was YouTube and streaming, and all of that stuff becoming much more popular and accessible. So the idea of an indie game being completely unknown, it's hard now. I mean, there's always someone streaming it, or someone making a video about it. So I think it was a unique combination of circumstances, but it's a very special game to me. It always will be. For personal reasons as well as because it's just an extraordinary game. But I really do feel like of course I wasn't the only person to discover Demon's Souls. I'm not not as big headed as to say like it was me, I'm the one. But I was part of an early wave of people that discovered it, and it felt like we were all part of something really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember a few years prior to the release of Demon's Souls, there was a lot of focus around like console exclusives. But after release of Lair, people stopped paying so much attention. It's weird to think that a low budget game could be like such a sensation thanks to word of mouth.
Yeah, and it was part of the way the game was designed as well. Like it was designed around people helping each other through it, and designed so that it basically necessitated you finding other people who were playing it to figure out what the heck was going on.
I wouldn't have gotten through it without a guide.
There was a rudimentary wiki when I was playing that people from this forum thread, basically this forum thread and this very rudimentary wiki were the only kind of presences for this game online. And now obviously that's part and parcel of the Souls experience. Like everybody has the wiki open in a tab on their phone while they're playing.
Yeah,
that's how it goes.
I remember the worst part for me was the flame lurker. Oh my god, that was horrible. Like I'm not really good with being chased in games. But I had such a tough time with Flame Lurker because he just comes at you. He's this big flaming dude and he just jumps at you. He smashes you. You're like one hit and you're done pretty much.
I remember that being a really pivotal moment in the game for me as well, because I realized that you needed to change your equipment.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like fannying about with some massive axe, and you're not going to get anywhere with Flame Lurker with loads of armor and a massive axe. He will just pounce. So
exactly.
I remember taking all my armor off and finding a dagger and stuff and trying to, or a long sword or something. And that's something fundamental about Demon's Souls. I think that, was a real watershed moment, was figuring out that actually you can change your playstyle pretty much any time, just change your equipment.
Yeah.
Although I never used magic, and magic made the game really easy, I later discovered. I mean, easy.
It
comparatively
did.
Easy.
That's how I got him. Then in the end, I think I used a lot of magic.
Yeah, and I don't think I used any magic because I couldn't figure it out because it was all in Japanese. I couldn't figure out how to even use magic my first playthrough. And so I kind of struggled through. I always remember battling. A Tower Knight for me was the set piece battle. I spent a whole 3 days on Tower Knight. And, with my stupid little sword, hacking its ankles. And I was running up and getting all those archers, and then running down, hacking its ankles, hacking, and always just literally just getting stepped on.
Yeah. And, you're done.
Yeah. And I eventually beat him like that, got him down, he fell over and hit his head and so on. And, I finally beat him, and it was the biggest achievement I felt like I'd ever had in a game. It was incredible. And then when the game came in the US, people were like, "Oh, you can just use arrows."
And you're just like, "No, you can't.
Can just stand on the battlements and shoot him with some magic with your catalyst, and that's that, and he's over." And I was like, "No."
I know.
That happened to me again in Dark Souls, because I reviewed Dark Souls for IGN. And this was, Souls was still very underground at that point. And so the version of Dark Souls I was playing was A, not finished, and B, not online. So
Oh my
there were
gosh.
20 people in the world playing this game, and we all had an email thread going like, ah! And so I got stuck on the Taurus demon because I had a rusty dagger, and I wasn't paying attention when it told you about like jumping on enemies' heads.
Yeah.
So Taurus
Yeah.
is easy as pie if you just jump on that tower and then, launch yourself off.
Yeah,
the
just
tower.
climb up the ladder.
I didn't do that.
That you don't see unless you turn around.
I fought him on the bridge. I fought him on the bridge with a dagger. Every time he swiped me off the edge of the battlements, I'd just like plunge to my death. And so it took me like a half day to do the Taurus demon in the end.
But it is the thing. How are you supposed to know that there's a ladder there unless you just like physically know it's there because you just have to turn around?
Classic Souls.
It really is.
So there's a few, mostly due to the circumstances. There've been a few really quite easy bosses in Souls games that have been my Everests.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, it is the beauty, and we do like the pain, like in a weird way.
I think that's something all Souls people have in common. Like the pain is what makes it worthwhile when you actually do succeed.
Absolutely. And in 2016, you did actually write a book. You died with Jason Killingsworth, the Dark Souls companion.
I did.
What was the impetus for you to decide, like, okay, I'm going to write a book on Dark Souls?
I spent at that point 6 years nattering on to anyone who would listen about Dark Souls. And I had a publisher approach me to write a book about something.
Oh, cool.
Just anything. They wanted me to write about something. And I put a few pitches forward. And the one that made most sense to me was Dark Souls because it had such a huge community element. So we could write lots of chapters about different people in the Souls community and different stories from players, as opposed to just writing about the game itself, which would be a bit academic. So I kind of wanted to get the game out of my system, finally. Didn't work. I thought, if I write a book about this, maybe I'll be done talking about Dark Souls.
Yeah.
And it's very hard writing a book. Like, I know it's not, there are probably many harder things in life, but trying to write 100,000 words about something is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And, I was doing it on top of my day job. So I was just staying up into the night writing about Dark Souls. And it's a really weird game to be writing about at 3 a.m. And, yeah.
Probably very creepy.
It was. Yeah, you start to get like really, really, because we wrote a lore appendix, and me and Jason, my co-author, we'd be on Google Chat in the early hours of the morning, like sending each other links to random fan theories about freaking ceaseless discharge. Being like, have you thought about this? And we'd end up writing these things that eventually ended up sounding like the ramblings of mad people about Dark Souls lore. But we got there. The book's being reissued as a really, really beautiful hardback this year.
Oh, cool.
By actually my co-author Jason started his own publishing company, and it's his first book. So
fantastic.
He's putting out a really beautiful deluxe edition of it this year. So hopefully lots more people will be able to read it, because I'm very proud of it. I was very proud of that book.
Yeah, I'll pick it up. I love the Souls series, particularly. There's so much depth to it that you don't even realize, like, you just sort of scratch the surface of it when you play the game, but like replaying it, it's mind-blowing.
I feel like it's one of the few games that has the depth and vision of like a really, really amazing novel, like a truly great work. And it's funny because then Bloodborne came along and was just as good, if not better. I'm starting to think, like, can Miyazaki make a game that isn't incredible? Like, it's quite,
oh my God,
quite something. Because Sekiro was a bit of a difficult game for me. Of course, it's a difficult game for everyone.
Yeah,
especially difficult for me because it came out when I was pregnant with my second kid, and I just didn't have the ability to play that game. Like, I played it for about, I think, 3 weeks for work because I was reviewing it. And I just had to move on because I couldn't keep, spending all of my time on Sekiro. Much as I would have loved to, I couldn't keep spending all my work time on it. And I didn't have...
You get so frustrated, don't you? Like, it's hard to play games like that when you feel yourself getting angry.
Exactly. You need plenty of time, lots of time.
Yeah.
And I didn't have really any, what it's like with kids. You have like a few hours in the evening to play anything. And like by the time I'd gotten into the mindset I needed for Sekiro, it would be time to go to bed.
Yeah.
So like I still haven't finished Sekiro, and I don't think I can't see when I will, to be honest. Maybe when
there will come a day
when my kids are at school, I guess is the time I will have the time to sort of spend with it. It's a real weekend game. You need space and time to appreciate it and to to learn it. And yeah, I just never quite got there with it, which is really, really sad. So I'm just seeing it as something that I'm saving for later times, saving it for later. A lot of games are
it's
like
the
that
dream
now.
game. I know. Well, there's the other game as well that's gonna be coming out at some point. Isn't it with George R.R.?
Oh my God, yes, their collaboration with George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, what is it called?
Ring something.
Elden Ring.
Elden Ring. That's right.
it.
Yes.
Elden Ring. Got it.
Not Eternal.
Yeah, no.
No, it is Eternal Ring.
I know. Eternal?
Yes, apparently.
Oh, it's an Eternal Ring.
Wait.
Okay, sorry.
No, wait. Eternal Ring was a From Software game that was a PS2 launch title. I didn't know that. So I just randomly dropped.
Well, there you go.
Eternal.
He just really likes rings.
Yes, he does. Sorry, I've just realised that I've not thought about Eternal Ring in a long time. I played it back in the day, and I actually never realised that was a From Software game.
Well, there you go.
Anyway, there we go. Yeah, Eternal Ring.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
You learn something every day.
Anyway, Elden Ring.
But yeah,
George R. R. Martin won that. I mean, I'm very excited about that. I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, so I'm very excited.
Oh my God. When we heard about that, Daryl and I were just like, what's going to happen with this? It's almost as excited as I was when Hideo Kojima announced that he was doing a game with Guillermo del Toro. I was just like, I need this game.
No matter what it is, I need it.
I know. But yeah, no, that's going to be awesome. But sort of shifting gears a bit, you also wrote an article for Eurogamer in 2018 talking about the diversity problem that exists within the industry. Do you feel as though since then steps have been taken to help improve this? Because as you mentioned, there's like no lack of talent out there.
Yeah, so the origins of that Eurogamer article were that someone ran the numbers and basically did what percentage of the articles on various major games websites were written by women. And on Kotaku, which I was in charge of at the time, it was like, 50, 40, 50, something like that. And on The Guardian, it was, 40, 50, and so on. And IGN, it was a bit lower. But then Eurogamer had less than 1% of its articles, I think it was for the first 3 months of that year, whatever it was, were written by women. And I just felt really disappointed about that. So I tweeted about it. I was just like, this is really poor. Like, I understand the challenges that exist in achieving gender parity in your company in video games. Like, it's hard. The pool of applicants you get is overwhelmingly male. And, just the straight numbers mean it's hard to really achieve parity, right? I get it. But if you've got less than 1%, that is a failure of imagination. That is you not looking.
Yeah.
That is you not looking.
Yeah.
It's not that there are literally no women out there who are writing amazing stuff about games and who are very talented. There are lots, but you're not looking for them. And I think that this is a problem across all of media. And it's usually a class problem, actually, because people just look in their mental Rolodex, right? They think, I need someone to write this. And they just think of someone that they already know. And it gets handed out to them. And in wider media, not games media, that's often a class thing. It's people that people know from previous jobs, people that people know from university even. And so breaking in becomes hard because a lot of the work gets handed out around this kind of small circle of, columnists, essentially, or people who know the editors. And then in the games media, that problem's compounded by the fact that for a long time, everybody was a dude. Like there was 2 women in games media when I started. 2. It was me and the editor of Edge. That was it. And
wow.
Now it's very different because, you said have steps been taken? I guess steps have been taken in some ways, but I think what's really happened is that it's just organically changed because more women have worked their way up, and then the more women are present, the more women you get because you get visible women in positions of power or of influence, and then more women feel empowered to go for that career. That's the effect that happens. So now the editor of Edge is a woman. There's me. I'm, games editor at The Guardian now. The editor-in-chief of IGN, Tina Amini, is a woman. The editor of Games Radar is a woman. Like, a lot of us now, there's a lot of women in positions that they just weren't in when I started out. And so it has changed for the better. There's much, and I think that games journalism, games writing, whatever you want to call it, games media, is in such a better place now than where it was when I started out. Like, when I started out, it was kind of previews and reviews, really. And now the span of stuff that you get that comes under the umbrella of the games media, the sort of variety of voices and, opinions and different types of article and video and everything's just, there's so much there and so much creativity and, you know, such high quality in a lot of it. And that just comes from having a great diversity of voices.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I'm really always impressed actually with the games media these days, like in terms of like as a whole, the quality and the variety of what gets put out, the kind of thoughts that get had and expressed about games now, way different from how it was. And I think it's really, really good. I mean, there's a lot of crap out there as well, obviously.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I was working at Kotaku, we had a lot of pride in our, like our news journalism, in our ability to find what the truth was and, you know, work with sources and uncover important stories about the games industry. And there's still not a great deal of that going on overall in the games media because there isn't the investment, like there's not the interest in that kind of stories from a lot of the media owners. You know, they want whatever's going to get clicks, and doing proper reporting takes time, it takes money, and it takes talent, and all of those things are expensive. So that's the reason you don't get such a lot kind of deep investigative reporting in the games world, but you still get so much other great stuff. Criticism is brilliant. Games criticism is so much better than it was. You know, when I was reading games magazines, you'd still basically get 3 paragraphs of whether the graphics were good. And you know, and now it's you know, it's much better. I frequently read things about games from people who are not like me in whatever way, and learn something, think about things in a different way. That's what I want from criticism of any medium. I want to be, you know, taught a different way to think about something. And that happens now frequently when I read games criticism, which is really good.
And I mean, has there been much of a change now that you've gone to somewhere like The Guardian from places like Kotaku and Eurogamer?
Huge. It really couldn't be more different in 2 ways. Firstly, the mainstream media is female dominated, actually. Like there's loads more women than men. And everybody at The Guardian is extraordinarily talented. Like I almost haven't met anybody who isn't like frighteningly good.
Yeah.
So you got everyone, and also people are doing really important stuff, like legitimately important stuff. You know, my cousin works at The Guardian. She heads up their reporting into modern slavery. And, you know, when you're part of an organization like that, you kind of hear everyone's update on Brexit reporting and environmental reporting and then modern slavery. And then you're like, hello, I do the video games. And suddenly it feels all quite ridiculous and trivial. So it's a very, very different world. And also, like, you know, I'm just such a tiny, minuscule part of that organization. Whereas in games world, you get to be a bit of a big fish in a small pond after a while. So it's very good for me, I think, to move away from the specialist games media and into, like, you know, an organization where, you know, games are just one of a billion things that they do. You know, because I still take pride in doing it really, really well. But however well you do it, it's still just one of a lot of things that The Guardian does. Yeah. And I think that's been good for me, actually. It's challenged me to, you know, think of different ways of covering games and also to get outside of my comfort zone. You know, by the time I started working at The Guardian, I'd been working in, you know, specialist games media for 12 years. Yeah. So that was my comfort zone, big time. It took a bit of a step to get out of it, and it's been very rewarding. It's been good for me.
On that note, I also thought it was really cool that you launched a podcast focused around people who work in and around games that have kids.
Ah, yes.
Right before you were due to have your second kid as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the reason I started the podcast, which is Spawn Point. It's called Spawn Point. Was because I just come back from maternity leave. So in the UK, we get a year of maternity leave, which is great. So I came back after 10 months with my first. And I'd had 10 months, my first 10 months ever, off games, basically. Bearing in mind that I'd been constantly playing and writing about and thinking about games all the time, professionally, since I was a teenager. Having that time off kind of really made me think differently about games. And it really made me rediscover them. It was the year that Zelda Breath of the Wild came out. I spent that whole year just playing Zelda. I didn't play anything else. I just played Zelda, and I wasn't constantly thinking, how do I turn this into content? You know, how do I have an opinion about this? I was just enjoying it and playing it while my son was asleep and just having the greatest time ever. The Switch is amazing for parents of young children for that reason. You can squeeze in games wherever you can and wherever you are.
Yeah.
So I just had a year off games. And then when I came back, I came back to my job at Kotaku. I was editor-in-chief of Kotaku in the UK. And I came back to my job, and the first thing I wrote was about, I think it was Destiny 2. It was about Destiny 2. And I basically just wrote an article saying, damn, I can't play this. You know, it's really hard to play if you're a parent.
Yeah.
And it just got a really bad response. It got, like, I would say, taken the wrong way. Maybe I was being naive because basically I think it came across as me saying, this game doesn't work for me and it should, meh, meh, meh. Whereas what I was basically saying was, I'm a parent now, these kinds of games are really hard to fit in. And it just got really badly received. I had like a lot of Destiny fans being like, well, you know, I love it. Why should it fit into your life? It fits into mine. And I'm like, okay, I was just saying.
Yeah.
And
this is just a perspective.
This is it. And that was the first time that I really felt like, oh, I'm tired of this. You know, like I just wanted to be able to write from my perspective as a parent.
Yeah.
And it engendered all this, like, you know, you got the usual kind of rush of, you know, comments and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, for God's sake. I was just expressing a perspective. And so that was the very first thing that happened when I came back to work at Kotaku.
Oh my goodness, that's not a good way to go back in.
You do get used to, you know, you work in this job, you do get used to, you get thick-skinned, you get used to, you know, online. You get used to
abuse,
being online abuse, etc., over random stuff that doesn't really matter. Like at IGN, there was a lot of it, just random things. You'd think that something might actually engender. I remember writing an article about a gay history of gaming I wrote for IGN ages ago, 2013. I thought, oh shit, I better gear up for the internet abuse.
I know.
And I didn't get any internet abuse for that.
That's amazing.
But then I wrote a review of The Wonderful 101 and gave it like a 7.9 or something, and just months and months and months of constant death threats.
How dare you?
It was so weird. I mean, I didn't like that game as much as lots of other people. I think, you know, it's seen as a modern classic, so, you know, I didn't like it as much as lots of other people. But still, it was very strange. Like sometimes the things that you didn't think would be a big deal ended up being like constant like abuse, and some of the things that you think, oh shit, I better watch out for this one, no one cared. The Destiny 2 article was like that. I was like, I really didn't expect this to be at all controversial, but there you go. And that's one of the reasons I actually took the Guardian job when it came up, is I thought I'm actually not able to play games in the way that I used to. And actually in the way that you kind of need to work for a website like IGN or Kotaku. You know, like the audience is such that, you know, you can't keep up. You know,
you need to fit in with them.
100%. Like the audience is playing many more games than you are and has much more time than you do to play. And I really just felt that. You know, I started thinking that this is I can't get away from this. Like I can't play. You know, I can't care about, you know, updates to the Division 2. Like I just can't, like, patch notes. You know, the kind of thing that is a news story in the specialist media. I just couldn't. It wasn't even on my radar anymore because I don't have the time to play games in that way. And so one of the reasons I took the job at The Guardian is because it was covering games from a broader perspective. You know, it wasn't an enthusiast perspective. And the other thing was I wanted to kind of be a voice for, I thought, I can't be the only one. Surely I can't be the only person who's in this situation.
Yeah.
And whenever I did start writing about parenting stuff around games, I wrote a few things for Kotaku over the years and a few for The Guardian. Every single time I get this huge wave of people being like, oh my God, yes, I feel so seen. And I thought, you know, why isn't there something for us? And so that's why I started the podcast. Although ironically, I've only managed to get like 4 episodes out in nearly a year. Because I had my second baby.
When you have kids, oh my God, especially the second kid, it's hard.
I was warned about the second baby. And I didn't listen. I was like, because I was one of those idiots that
you don't know.
You don't know. I mean, it's like when you have your first baby. I actually went pretty well. I was like, he was a lovely child, and you know, I took it quite well. And it was very hard, but I was enjoying it loads. And so I thought, great, I'll have another one. It'll be fine. And oh my God, it's like,
I know.
It was a disaster for the first few months. We were like, oh my God, we've made a dreadful mistake.
Yeah,
much better now.
Exactly that.
It was so overwhelming. So I just had, you know, I couldn't even think about doing anything for about 5 months. And then this whole COVID situation's come along, so that's been also quite difficult to get around in terms of doing any recording.
Because this is around the time where like you sort of start itching, because 7 months is around the time where I'm like, okay, I can start feeling like myself again. I can start doing stuff again and like test the waters and stuff. Yes. And it's like, actually.
Yeah, I was supposed to be going back to work this month. 1st of April was the day I was supposed to go back, and then it was like, oh, no, that's not going to be happening. No. Instead, you're going to be indoors with both of your children for, who knows, another month, 2? Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so I'm really, I haven't managed to put out as much Spawn Point as I'd like to, but I'm really keen to keep it going because it's got just a great response. And I do think it's important to be able to talk about games from the perspective of like a time-pressed parent without having 414-year-olds going at you.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's kind of important. There needs to be a space where you don't have to play for 100 hours a week or even 50 hours a week or 30, you know. A huge number of the people who play games and love them very dearly can only play like 10 hours a week or less. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. They still want to hear about cool games. They still want to, chat about games. They still want to keep up to date, but they don't necessarily have the ability to, finish the latest thing the weekend that it comes out in the way that, I used to in my 20s.
Or even like the circle to talk to, because most of the time I'm interacting with other moms who are great, but I am probably the only, I think I legitimately am the only gamer mom that I know within the 5-mile radius.
I find that too. It's really strange. Like
it's really hard.
I've made lots of mum friends, but I haven't organically found anyone who's, also plays games, who's also a geek. Yeah, I got recognized once at baby swimming by a dad.
Did you? I know, that's the thing. The dads always know, and it's such a like stereotype thing where you're just kind of like, oh great, okay, I just have to be the mom with all the dads. But dads never go to anything.
No, the dads never do they? Yeah, I was at baby swimming, and this guy kept sort of looking at me, and I was like, I must look like hell, because my son was about 4 months old, and my hair was everywhere, and I just thought, I just must look so bad that this guy's like, holy shit. But then, afterwards he had a Super Mario sling on, and I went, oh, I love your sling. And he went, I'm really, really sorry, but are you Keza MacDonald? And I was like, oh, okay.
Yep.
That's what that was.
That's why.
Yeah, but that's never happened with a mum ever once. Not yet. No. I mean, I've met a few online. I get people online.
Oh, yeah.
I'm on one of there's a Discord for gamer mums, I think. Are you on that as well? It's a good Discord.
No, I'm not. I'm going to join that.
I'm going to invite you. It's a good one.
Yes.
And yeah, there's a few of us around, but I've never actually just spontaneously randomly met another mum who also happens to be into games. It's just never happened. It's kind of sad. I think it's partly because the age thing. So in my area, I'm 31 and I'm still quite young.
Yeah, same.
In the mum set, like a lot of the mums are 35 plus. Yeah. And I think that there is a huge difference. Like basically everyone in their 20s plays games, male or female, but then you get just a little bit older. And people who are 40 plus, basically most of them don't play games.
Yeah.
And,
it's really weird.
It's strange,
It's really strange.
It's a very big generational change.
How is that generation change so, like, divided
really abrupt,
between us?
It? Yeah, it's really abrupt. My partner's a bit older than me. He's 47. And he's unusual for, like, most of his friends don't play games, even the guys.
Yeah.
It's strange. So... yeah, I also I've met some really lovely gamer parents through doing Spawn Point. And I'd love to have more time once all this is over to kind of create more of a space for gamer parents, because I think this is also, as my kids get bigger, I'm going to start playing games with them, and that's going to be so special, and I'm really looking forward to it. And so it's a rich vein, I think, and I'd love to be a voice for the people out there who maybe feel like they don't get to call themselves a gamer anymore because they don't get to play as much as they used to. That's not how things should be.
No, of course not. But yeah, that's all I have.
Marvelous.
Thank you so much, Keza, for coming on. And thank you so much for chatting with me about Spawn Point and about just journalism in the games industry in general. Again, you are such an inspiration to us all. And I feel really honored to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
That's it for this episode of She Plays Games. Be sure to follow Keza on Twitter at Keza MacDonald, and also be sure to check out Keza's podcast, Spawn Point. Just search Spawn Point on your chosen platform. Also, if you want more episodes of She Plays Games, please be sure to subscribe and follow me on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube by searching She Plays Games, and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at She Plays Podcast. If you want to be on the show or want to nominate someone to come on the show, you can email me at sheplayspodcast@gmail.com. See you all next time on She Plays Games.